Hey everybody, we're going to read the book Saving Wild One by Tracy Zimmerman and illustrated by Todd Doney. So, Chapter 1, A Rare Encounter. South Dakota farm life was pretty peaceful. The nearest neighbor was a mile away and the farm animals didn't stir up much trouble. But one morning when Maggie woke up, she had a feeling things were about to change. The day began with her mother shouting and banging pots and pans outside, and Maggie jumped out of bed, threw on a shirt and some jeans, and raced across the dusty field. "Mom, what are you doing?" Maggie asked with alarm. "Blasted fox is after our chickens," her mother exclaimed. "Next time I might as well fire off the old shotgun to give him a good scare." Maggie knew her mom needed to be tough. Maggie couldn't harden her heart against any hungry animal, not even a thieving fox. She also knew that her mother wouldn't want to hurt the wildlife that often intruded on their land, eating the bushes and flowers, but the family depended on the chickens for their eggs. Maggie's favorite breakfast was scrambled eggs with cheddar cheese, which her mom made nearly every Saturday. Just the thought of it made her hungry. Mom had just started cooking breakfast when she'd seen the fox. Maggie thought about going back to bed, but instead she started setting the table. Of course, they were having eggs. Maggie thought about the old shotgun Mom kept in the hall closet for protection. She wondered if the fox was visiting other farms nearby. She thought about one particular neighbor who wouldn't be so kind, one who wouldn't shoot into the air to scare the fox, but would aim right at it. Maggie shuddered and tried to take her mind off the cruelty of the world, but her mom announced, "Breakfast is ready." That afternoon, while hiking on a rocky trail in the woods, Maggie saw the fox her mother had scared off. Maggie had just positioned herself on a tree stump to rest when she spotted it. She was sure it was the same fox because of its unusual markings, those of an endangered fox called a swift fox. It had a gray back with reddish fur on both its underbelly and on the underside of its tail. Its tail was also tipped in black, and it had a black spot on either side of its snout. The fox was small, only about the size of a cat, and Maggie knew that these foxes, the smallest of all foxes in North America, were quite rare. They had once been common throughout the central plains of the United States and Canada, but as far more farms, ranches, and towns were built on the plains, the swift fox had become more and more scarce. It saddened Maggie when she thought about how the fox had fallen victim to fur traps as well as traps and poison set out to kill large canine predators such as wolves and coyotes. In addition, these little foxes sometimes became a meal for hungry coyotes, even a bird of prey such as an eagle or red-tailed hawk. In recent decades, the swift fox had been making a comeback with the help of people from Canada and the United States who relocated foxes from populated areas to wilderness areas where they would be protected. However, it was still rare to see one, and Maggie felt very lucky. Maggie watched the creature nose around some bushes and then saw it disappear behind a log. She quietly rose to investigate and observe a fox's movements. Behind the log was a hole about 6 inches in diameter, where the fox had slipped in. This was his den. When Maggie proceeded to get a closer look at the den, goosebumps tickled her skin on her arms. There was no way she was going to tell Mom about the exciting discovery. This was a secret all her own for at least now. Creeping back so that she wouldn't disturb the animal, she crouched behind the chokecherry bush about 10 yards from the den and watched to see if the fox would reappear. But the swift fox did not emerge, and after 20 minutes or so, Maggie decided to head home. Maggie had something to look forward to after school. She would slather a piece of toast with peanut butter, grab a handful of trail mix and an apple, and head outside with her backpack before her mom could add it to her list of chores. Feeding the chickens and gathering eggs had been Maggie's responsibility for a few years now, ever since she was old enough to do the jobs on her own. But there were always additional work to do on the farm, and she grew older, more responsibility was shared. Would her mom suspect something when she didn't complain or dawdle this week about her chores as she usually did? For 3 afternoons in a row, Maggie returned to the same spot each time she saw the fox near the den. On the fourth day, thunderstorms and a tornado watch kept Maggie and her mom in the basement for the afternoon and evening. When she went back to the woods the next day, she waited and waited, but there was no sign of the fox. She was just about to head home when she heard the soft, thin cry coming from the direction of the fox den. Although Maggie had lived half of her life in the woods, she had never heard this sound. She moved cautiously towards the den, and there it was again, that piteous whimper. Maggie had never gotten this close before, and the little hairs on the back of her neck were prickling up with curiosity. Peering from behind a tree, she saw the source of the whimpering. A baby fox, the young kit, had a black tipped tail and distinctive black markings on its muzzle. As Maggie approached, the kit slid into its den, and Maggie wondered where was its mother? Why hadn't she come back to the den today as she had all the other days this week? Perhaps she was out hunting. However, Maggie knew it was unusual for swift foxes to search for food during the day. Usually they confine their hunting to the night and the early morning. Maggie had a sinking feeling that it was very likely something had happened to the baby fox's mother. She was worried that the little kit might become a meal for a coyote or hawk, and she decided to guard the den from a distance, hoping the kit's mother would return shortly. 2 hours passed, and Maggie became a fixture with the landscape. She loved the twilight, the time between day and night when the nocturnal animals started to stir. She heard owls hooting as the few bats flew by, and while the sky was dark, a full moon illuminated parts of the woodland path where the secret trees parted. Where the trees parted. There was still no sign of the kit's mother, so Maggie concluded that the kit had been orphaned. She had hoped that her visits to the den hadn't scared the mother away. What should she do? All right, so right here is kind of the transition between the exposition and the inciting incident. So those two things have already happened. All right. The remaining part of the book are going to be rising action, climax, resolution. Maggie knew she shouldn't interfere with nature, but she couldn't bear to leave the helpless kid alone. Maggie emptied her backpack and placed a short distance from the den. Then she sprinkled a line of trail mix from the den inside of the bag. Within minutes, the hungry kit emerged from the den. It nibbled the trail mix until it was inside Maggie's backpack, and Maggie perceived a great opportunity and knew she had to act quickly. Scooping up the backpack, she trapped the animal inside. The kit tumbled around, clawing frantically. "I'll name you Wild One," Maggie said with a laugh, and she didn't like keeping the kit wrapped up inside her backpack, but she knew it would be too dangerous to try and hold the kit in her arms. So she spoke in soothing tones. "It's okay, little Wild One. Better be inside my backpack than inside a coyote's stomach." As Maggie approached her house, she was relieved to see that her mother's pickup truck was gone. Mom wouldn't approve of keeping a wild animal, especially a fox, on the premises, and Maggie headed to an empty pen behind the barn. She plugged holes in the pen's wire fencing by shoving rocks into the possible escape holes. She cleaned out a small shelter at one end of the pen and lined it with grass, creating a new den for the kit. Maggie set water and an apple near the shelter. Wearing leather gloves she had retrieved from the machine shed, Maggie gently unzipped the bag and then stepped back behind the fence. "I hope you like your new home, the Wild One," she asked. "The Wild One," she said. The kit scampered out. As she watched them, Maggie double-checked to make sure she had all the holes plugged. "I should have done this before letting it out," Maggie chided herself. The kit was walking toward a small hole that Maggie had missed. But just before the kit escaped, Maggie thrust a rock in the way. Before leaving, she carefully checked for other gaps and said goodnight. Maggie still wasn't sure she had done the right thing, and there was a nagging feeling that she couldn't shake off. What if the kit becomes too dependent on me and is unable to live in the wild? For the next week, Maggie sneaked out into the pen to visit Wild One whenever she had a free moment. She wished for a vacation from school and even considered pretending she was ill. But she decided against that type of deception. She spent more time with the Wild One on the days when her mom's truck was gone. She brought the fox water, scraps of food from her old meals, and live crickets so the Wild One could practice hunting. At first, he wasn't very good at catching the crickets, but over time he improved. As Maggie watched the fox each day, she rehearsed arguments to convince her mom that the Wild One should stay. Meanwhile, Maggie was sure that her mom suspected nothing. On Friday night, 2 weeks after Wild One had moved in, Maggie woke up with a start. She heard a lonely howl of a coyote, and it was very close by, so Maggie's first thoughts was on the Wild One. They had trouble with coyotes before, so Maggie knew just what to do. She got out of bed and grabbed a jacket from the coat tree, and then found a new tennis ball and a flashlight. Maggie dashed over to Wild One's pen, looking cautiously in all directions. Then she saw the coyote pawing at the pen, trying to get in. Catching her breath, Maggie took aim at the coyote and threw the tennis balls. Once, twice, and the third time. That coyote ran away. Before going back to the house, she checked to see if any of the rocks had been knocked out of the holes. Back in bed, Maggie drifted into an uneasy sleep. She was concerned the coyote might come back or that other predators could snatch Wild One away from her protective care. On Saturday, Maggie had another big scare. Her mom had gone into town to buy provisions, and Maggie stayed home to write a term paper and care for Wild One. She was taking a break, drinking lemonade by the kitchen window, when she spied a large bird perched near the end of the driveway. The bird looked like a golden eagle, the biggest bird in the region. She could tell it was a golden eagle because of its dark brown color with lighter golden feathers at the nape of its neck. The eagle must have been rather young because it still had white on its tail, the mark of an immature bird. With a thrill of excitement, Maggie watched open-mouthed as the eagle lifted slowly into the air and flew toward the house. It settled and perched again, this time on a fence post just a few yards away from the kitchen window. Maggie had never seen such a powerful bird this close, and she marveled at its ability to sit perfectly still, almost as if it had gone to sleep. But Maggie could see that its eyes were wide open and looking toward the Wild One's pen. Maggie's stomach tightened as she suddenly realized what had brought the eagle so close to the house. The eagle was hungry, and Wild One was an easy target. She bolted out the door, jumped the steps, ran toward the pen. She saw Wild One drinking from his dish out in the open, completely unaware of the eagle's presence. Watching in horror, Maggie saw the eagle fly low over the pen, preparing to dive, and Maggie ran harder and yelled, waving her hands above her head to distract the eagle. Wild One, look out, Maggie shouted, but she knew the little fox couldn't understand what she was saying. Abruptly, the eagle changed course, rising up and away from the pen and circling overhead. Maggie had startled it just in time. She ran to the side of the pen, still hollering, and this time she started Wild One as she ran to the shelter. Maggie breathed a sigh of relief as she thought, he's safe. The eagle circled higher and wider as Maggie watched it move gradually to the north and disappear over a low hill. Then Maggie turned and saw something else, her mother's truck. She knew instantly that her mom had seen everything. Maggie's mother walked slowly from the truck toward Wild One's pen. What have you got in the pen, honey? Nothing, said Maggie, looking down, scuffing her toe in the dirt. No, not nothing, her mother said sternly. What is it? Maggie knew it was useless to try and deceive her mother, but she had come to love the little animal, and she was afraid of what it might happen to it in the wild if her mother forced her to let it go. It's a fox, a baby swift fox, she said finally. Now, Maggie, you know you can't keep it, said her mother. Maggie gazed sadly at the Wild One, who was now asleep in his shelter. He looked small and fragile, not like anything that was meant to live on the same wild prairie as the coyote and the golden eagle. I know, Maggie whispered. So right there, before we continue with chapter 4, think about what the main problem in the book is. Has it been solved? Has it not been solved? And then think about what this next part is. That night, Maggie lay wide awake staring at the ceiling. She didn't know what she was going to do. To her surprise, her mother hadn't been angry with her. I took in lots of wild animals when I was your age, she said, but it wasn't fair to them. That fox is not meant to be a pet. Maggie knew her mom was right, and the pen was sufficient for a tiny kit, but it would totally inadequate for an adult fox. The next morning, Maggie watched the Wild One catching insects when a mouse scurried out of the nearby woodpile and into the pen. Wild One went after it in a flash. He showed great determination, pouncing on the mouse, missing, and pouncing again. After lunch, Maggie and her mom sat down on the computer to search for information about swift foxes and rescue organizations. They were surprised to learn that swift foxes don't kill chickens, preferring much smaller prey. So that a fox wasn't a threat to my hens after all, exclaimed Maggie's mother. Eventually, they found the perfect solution, a relocation program that moved swift foxes into protected land. On Monday, Maggie called the relocation office and told the director, Paul Running Elk, about Wild One. I think your program is perfect for him, she said. Maybe not, said Mr. Running Elk. You've had the fox for so long, he might be too comfortable with humans already. But Maggie didn't give up. She described how Wild One hunted for bugs and mice, persuading Mr. Running Elk that Fox might be young enough to learn skills for surviving in the wild. 2 days later, Mr. Running Elk came to the farm to take Wild One away. Maggie's heart sank as she watched him drive up, but she knew it was the humane thing to do. Mr. Running Elk lifted a wire kennel out of his truck, and then Maggie and her mother led him to Wild One's pen. The fox was curled up in a corner, sleeping peacefully, and Maggie called his name softly, and then she sprinkled a trail of granola from the fox's pen into the kennel. As Wild One began eating his way to the kennel, she said, "I'm sorry, little fellow, but it's time to say goodbye. Maybe I was wrong to take you from your den that day, but you seemed so small and helpless. Now you're big and strong, and it's time to let you go." Mr. Running Out snapped the kennel door shut behind Wild One and let Maggie have at least one last look before lifting the kennel into his truck bed. "Remember, you named him Wild One for a reason, Maggie," said Mr. Running Elk. "This guy will be much happier in the open plains than he could ever be in a cage." Maggie nodded as tears burned her eyes. Maggie and her mother watched Mr. Running Elk's truck pull away from the farm, the wheels kicking up gravel and dust. "I'll miss you, little Wild One," Maggie whispered. "Stay wild and safe."